Hi, I'm Jacob Heilbrunn, the editor of the National Interest, and my guest today is Milton Ezrati, senior economist, marketing strategist, and partner at Lord Abbett Company in New York. Milton, I have your new book here, which has been blurbed by an editor of a prominent magazine that says vital reading.
Yes, and I'm deeply grateful for that.
Tell me, 30 Tomorrows, the next 3 decades of globalization, demographics, and how we will live. What's the book about?
Well, the book is about, actually, let me tell you the reason I wrote the book. I go, in my job, in my work, I have to talk to a lot of audiences, some professional and some individual investors mostly. And one of the chronic questions I got, every meeting I went to, people would say to me, population is aging, what does this mean? A lot of the older people were saying, who's going to pay my pension? This is a dangerous situation. And I went to answer the question. I started researching so I'd have a reasonable answer for these people. And most of the stuff was either inflammatory or just nonsense. And I don't mean to discredit other people. It is a dangerous situation, not only because people will not pay pensions, and there's been a lot of media talk about what will happen to Social Security and pension systems, but also economically, there's a lot of retired people. They're not producing, they consume, someone has to produce for them. And so there's an economic aspect to this that's probably even more severe. But most of the material I saw said, this is a terrible situation and we're going to go and lose our prosperity. Pete Peterson, never a man known for his optimism, said that it would destroy democracy. Harry Dent has written a very popular book saying that this is going to destroy the economy. My response was, economies do not allow their prosperity to just slip away without doing something. So the bulk of this book is an investigation of what can be done, or what must be done in this population, in this aging population situation we have here in Europe and in Japan, even worse there than here, and to protect our prosperity. And what I discovered is, through my research, a lot of this is already happening, that we're doing a lot, and that there are many ways we can do this, but it's going to take quite a bit of change in the way we produce things in our economy and what we produce in our economy. And those changes create a lot of opportunity, but wrenching change.
Tell me about, to jump into a topic that's on everyone's mind today in Washington, State of the Union coming up. President Obama has released has aired his tax proposals. What's your take?
Well, I think prior to this announcement, I would have said, if someone said, what is the best thing you can hope for from Washington, I would have said tax reform, because both sides of the aisle and even the White House has endorsed the idea of lowering rates, broadening the base, getting rid of deductions. But with the president introducing this, I think we've scotched any chance of that going forward. So,
what's wrong with his proposal?
Well, from the economic standpoint, there's a lot of questions, and he hasn't fleshed it out. But he has gone in a completely different direction. Instead of saying we'll get rid of breaks and we will lower the statutory rate, he's talking about raising the statutory rate. It's a non-starter with the Republican Congress. I don't think any Republican will endorse this. And by saying that he wants to go in this direction, he's effectively saying, I will not endorse what both Democrats and Republicans have put forward in the past, which is this flattening, broadening approach.
Does the middle class need a tax cut, or is it not paying enough taxes?
Well, the middle class, depending on how you define it, and it's remarkable that it hasn't been defined yet, but the middle class does not pay a lot in income taxes. So giving them a break is really effectively saying a larger proportion of the population will not pay income tax. The biggest tax on lower income people in the United States is payroll taxes, Social Security, Medicare. Those are their big taxes, not an income tax. So giving them a break is not really helping. It's helping the high end of the middle class in the way things are structured today.
Do the wealthy pay, in your view, the appropriate amount of taxes roughly today, or do you think it's too much or too little?
Well, I can't make that judgment. I can say that they have gone up in recent years. Mr. Obama came into office saying they should pay more, and he has actually managed to get that. not as much as he wanted, but get that out of Congress. So I don't know whether they were paying too little and now they're paying just right, but they are paying more.
Let's talk about Europe. Is the euro doomed, or do you think it has some life potential left in it?
Well, I think the powers that be in Europe very much want this to survive. And my own take is that in the end, politics can trump economics. Economically, euro was never a good idea. Europe, as the economists like to say, is not a natural currency zone. It was going to go through a lot of trauma. I would say in response to that in 1789, the United States was not a natural dollar zone, and politics managed to hold this thing together until the economy was more unified. Perhaps the Europeans can do that. I'm not about to declare this thing dead. The Germans, who are bankrolling the whole thing, clearly want the euro, and they clearly benefit from the euro. And with that kind of power behind it, it may survive. But right now, the prognosis is not good.
Let's talk about the dollar. The dollar was being written off, left for dead only a few years ago. Now it has rebounded substantially against both the euro, the pound. What do you think the future is of the dollar?
Well, I think the dollar will remain the world's reserve currency, the premier currency, not because the United States is in great shape. We've read much, and I could go through it, but I don't think we have the time. All the financial and economic failings in this economy. It's a weak economy. We've had a couple of good quarters. I think they overstate the fundamental strength. We have a lot of big financial problems, but by comparison to Japan and Europe, we look good. And currencies, it's all a relative game. So as I've said before, and I will say it again, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king, and right now the dollar is the best bet. The best of a bad lot, but the best bet.
Which brings us to the Federal Reserve. Has it been too cautious about raising rates, or has it got it right?
Well, I think the Federal Reserve should raise rates, and I think they're determined to, in their terms, normalize the situation. They recognize that the economy is not as strong as they'd like it to be, but keeping rates at zero indefinitely is dangerous on a number of levels. And it's prejudicial to a lot of savers who depend on these rates to live, a lot of the elderly, and they're becoming a larger part of the population. So the Federal Reserve, for a number of reasons, and we can go into them if you'd like, wants to normalize. I think they've been very cautious, and I think that's a prudent policy because the economy has been very weak. But I actually agree with their determination at some date in the not too distant future to try to normalize this situation.
Is the inflation the real danger in your eyes?
Well, I think that's a long-term danger, and underscore the words long-term. The economy is soft. There is no inflationary pressure. Europe is actually threatened by deflation. Japan already has seen deflation, so it's not an imminent threat. But the Fed has to think long-term, and if they do not do something to stop this flood of liquidity they're pouring on the economy, ultimately there could be inflationary ramifications. Once we see them, it's too late, and then they're playing catch-up. So I applaud their efforts to get ahead of it. I would not applaud them if they move too fast. This is a very uncertain situation.
Do you see a future for bonds?
Not in the near term, no. Right now, as they raise rates, the yields on bonds will go up, and that means the prices will go down. If you buy treasuries today, just to give you some investment advice, you get paid a piddling yield while you wait for your capital loss. It is not an attractive investment.
What about the European Central Bank? It clearly wants to engage in quantitative easing. Do you think it's going to happen, and would it work, or is it just an escape, a false escape hatch for the European economies?
Well, I don't think it's going to work very well. It didn't work very well in the United States. It kept rates down in certain parts of the market for a while, but it certainly did not create the economic boom that people wanted from it. And I don't think the Europeans are going to get that. Their financial problems are a lot worse than ours. I do think, however, that while you're buying time for reform, and this is what the Germans want, and the ECB and the European Union, it can help to effectively paper over more fundamental problems while the authorities, or if the authorities, address those fundamentals. But they have to do that ultimately, or this will fail.
We've talked a lot about Europe and the United States, but what about the other big rising power, China? Where do you see its economy headed? China
is going to slow down, and it has slowed down, and I think that this is real. A lot of people have said the statistics in China are bogus. They probably are. But we don't have anything else but the statistics the Chinese give us. I think the important thing to realize, and the Chinese have documented this pretty well, they have about 1 million people a month who walk off the countryside, literally walk, into the cities looking for work. And the Chinese authorities know that they're riding a tiger. They have to get these people jobs, and that means they have to grow at least 5–6% a year. They have the financial resources to boost their economy. I think the Chinese will do that. But the Chinese are doing something else. They are trying very hard to become less export dependent and develop a domestic-based economic engine. They're failing thus far, but they are pouring a lot of resources into that. If the Chinese can succeed in doing that, then the prognosis is pretty good. If they fail, then not only do we lose China as an engine of growth in the world economy, but the Chinese authorities have a difficult time because, as I say, they're riding a tiger.
Let's talk about a country that is part of Europe, but not exactly in Europe, the island nation of the UK. Do you think, when we're talking about interest rates, does Mark Carney have it right at the Bank of England? Are they right to be concerned about the strength of the British economy? It does not look like they're going to raise interest rates anytime soon.
Well, I think that the British actually have moved more in tune with the United States through this crisis. And on that respect, they probably should be raising rates. But Britain is tied to Europe, and the slowdown, indeed, the recession in Europe is a burden on the British economy. They are tied, most of their sales are in Europe, and so Carney will probably be more reluctant than our Janet Yellen to raise rates there, just because he recognizes there will be negative repercussions from what is happening on the continent.
Final question. If by some chance it happened to be a President Ezrati sitting in the Oval Office, what economic policies, particularly when it comes to tax reform, would you be announcing in your State of the Union address?
Well, if there was a President Ezrati, that would be the first suicide in the White House, I think. But I would like to pursue the reforms that have been suggested in various ways by the Bowles-Simpson commission that the President endorsed some years ago, that has come from both the Republican and the Democratic side of the aisles, to keep the statutory rates down, get rid of the complexities, a lot of the tax breaks, and broaden the base. So that there is not an onerous tax burden on people, but so that it's more broadly paid at lower rates in general, and that the people right now who are using tax breaks and may be very wealthy to avoid tax altogether, or at least the bulk of it, are paying their, to use the President's term, fair share.
Milton, thank you very much.